So in this video, what we're going to do is we want to make sure that we can use this screen and this login button to actually get into our database. So first thing we need to do is create the function, and after we've created the function, we're going to link that function into to this button over here. So each function has got 3 steps, so let me write out this function first, and we're going to call this get login data. And I'm passing in 2 parameters, which is just U and P for username and password respectively. And here we've got 3 steps, okay? So step 1 is define your variables, okay? Step 2 is going to be create our executing the SQL query. And step 3 is the handling of the data. So these 3 steps are applied to every single function that we do inside of this process. Whether it's a select statement, an insert statement, update statement, or a delete statement, we always follow these 3 steps. So for this function, let's go and take them through step by step. And hopefully, as we get through these other functions, this pattern should emerge quite nicely. So the first thing is we need to create our 3 steps, our 3 variables that we're going to create. So the first one is a database variable, and we're just going to call that function. So over here, it's called connections. So we're just going to say this database variable over here is going to link to that function. The next thing that we're going to do is we need to create our SQL statement. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is select IDU and password from table users, and where UN equals that parameter, and UN equals user, and PW equals pass. And so what we have over here is basically a select statement that's going to come back, it's going to check if the username and password that we pass into this function is actually existing in the database. Now, what I am asking here is just to return the ID, username, and password. I don't want to return everything because we don't need everything. I'm only ever going to create a query that's going to ask for the data that I need, because if I ask for all bits of data and I have a lot of users and I have a big database, this data transfer can add up. So we might as well start with these good practices early on, even though we've got a very small example over here. The next thing that I want is I want to go and create my parameter array so that I can safely pass in this data that I'm asking for. So what this does is my parameters, here I've got :user, which we can see over here, and here I've got :pass, which I can see over here. And what this is doing here is that it's linking that variable to that user, or the other way around, is saying that parameter gets its value from that variable. So these are the 3 variables that we need, and the next step is that we are going to go and create our SQL, and we're going to execute our SQL query. So here I'm going to go STMT, short for statement, and that's just a convention variable. Again, you can call it whatever you want. And now what I'm going to do is call an object called prepare, and I'm passing in the SQL variable that we have here at the top. So on the database object from over here, we've got a function that we can call called prepare, and we're passing in our SQL query that's up the top over here. Next, what we need to do is we need to execute this query. And as part of executing this query, we're going to have our params array as the parameter, so that it knows to actually put these variables and parameters in as part of our query. And then the next thing is that we want to go and once we've got our statement executed, we want to put the results into an array, which we're just going to call result. And fetch a sock, fetch all. So here I've got fetch all, okay, so I'm fetching all the data. Now I don't need to pass in anything here in the parameter because when I did my connection string, I specified that I want it to be an associative array. But this result variable over here is now an array with all the data that's come back from the database if there was any to begin with. The third step is what are we going to do with this data? Okay, so what we're going to do is create a little variable here which is an output, just an empty string, and ultimately this is what we want to return from our function. But what this value is going to be depends on whether we get any data back from our database. So for that we need an if statement, and inside of this if statement we're going to call a PHP function called count, and count gives us an integer number which is the length of the array. So inside of here we just type in results, and we can check if that result is bigger than 0. If it's bigger than 0, obviously some data has come back from our database. If it is 0, then either a mistake has been made or something else has gone wrong, or there is actually no data. So whatever that is, we'll deal with that in just a moment. So output, what we want that to be is we want that to be a JSON string, and we want that what we're going to call is this function called JSON encode, and we're going to pass in our results array. Now a JSON string is, as the word implies, a string, which is what we defined up there, so that's not a problem. And then what we do is we're going to go and access this global variable called session, and we're just going to pass in, create a parameter name called data. So this data here is just basically our reference name, and inside of that we are going to reference, pass in this variable output. Now what I really could have done is just gone JSON encode and put that straight over there, but just so that it's consistent with being able to return that output data, we've just stuck it into that variable. Now once this variable has been created, what we want to do is we're just going to go and set up this global variable, and this global variable allows us to check what our current address is and redirect our page. So let's go and do that. So we go path equals, and there we go. No, we don't need those brackets, just that. PHP. And then we go header, which is a function that allows us to redirect our page. And we go location, and we go out of this function folder into admin, and then we can go path like that. So that should work. And then we exit this bit. So if our data is correct, we get back one account, and we then get redirected to our admin page. Of course, if this data is not correct, we need to go and redirect, or at least tell our user that they've done something wrong. So this is where the output string becomes a little bit more useful. So we're just passing in some HTML code, and we just say there was an error. There we go. And basically I'm just going to copy this string a couple of times, and we're just going to append some values. This is what I was after here. And basically I'm just going to go and copy that across, and I can just say, yep, please try again, and create two BR tags, and go output. And then we can just create an href link to our index page. Oh, we need to use right quotes. Index.php. Close that. Go to login page. Right, and then we can echo this output, or we can return it. We're just going to echo it actually, because we don't always need that there. Okay, so this is our little function, okay? We named the function, we've declared our variables, we've processed our query, and this is what we do with the result of the output, okay? So now we obviously need to be able to use this function, and we need to use this function when we click on this login button. And in the next video, we're going to link that function to this login page so that we can trigger it and log in with our account.